Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, you have no idea how you even feel about cooking because you've never tried it before, congratulations, you're in the right place. And I am DC Pierson. I'm your host. I'm a comedian, an author, an enthusiastic home cook. And if you are listening to this, I'm pretty sure that it is, if you're listening on the day it comes out, pretty sure it's election day. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that because you know everything you need to, I think. Please vote if you haven't already. Go. It seems probably throw a mask on. This is probably pretty safe. So just, you know, do what you can, and I will do what I can to provide a mental space of not that for about an hour and a half. We'll see how it goes. My guest today on the show, Michael Hoffman. Mike Hoffman is a super cool director. For many years, he directed Soap Dish, the movie The Emperor's Club, One Fine Day with George Clooney and Michelle Pfeiffer, a super, super good romantic comedy. If you need another like 90 minutes to 2 hours of not thinking about crazy stuff today, watch One Fine Day. It's so good. Mike is a super smart, interesting person, super well traveled. He's shot things all over the world and traveled all over the world, eaten tons, cooked tons. We had such an interesting conversation. I really enjoyed listening to Mike's travels and insights, and I was thrilled to get to talk to him. He is in London right now, so he's coming at you live and direct from London, and by live and direct, I mean recorded a couple weeks ago now at this point. But I really, really enjoyed it. I think you will too. And what I'm about to do before we get into the Mike interview is cook. If you take one thing away from listening to this show for its entire run, I really want it to be this recipe. It's how much I like this recipe. It is Ruth Reichl's Spicy Chinese Noodles. It's from a memoir that she wrote that came out, I want to say last year, called Save Me the Plums, about her time as editor-in-chief at Gourmet magazine in the 90s and early 2000s, the sort of like heyday of glossy food magazines and being in New York publishing. And it's a really, really cool, interesting memoir. She's such an interesting, smart thinker about food for like forever now. She is the best. I went to like a signing for this book when it came out at the LA Times Festival of Books on the USC campus, and it was really, really great. It's such a good book, and this recipe is there's not a ton of recipes in the book, but the ones that there are fantastic, and this is by far the favorite. Haley and I have made this so many times. It's just our go-to, like, do you want something that is just good and it's fast and it's so satisfying? This is it. And let's get into it. Quick check of my ingredients. First, half pound of Chinese noodles, dried egg noodles, or spaghetti. I've made it with all of those, and honestly, my favorite is just plain old spaghetti. So we have half a pound of plain old spaghetti. It calls for peanut oil. We're out of peanut oil right now, so I just have neutral oil, like a grapeseed oil. You could also use like canola oil. If you have peanut oil, I mean, it's great, but I wouldn't say it would kill you if you didn't have it. Half an inch long piece of fresh ginger, 2 scallions, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 2 tablespoons of Chinese black bean paste with garlic, 1 tablespoon of Chinese bean paste with chili. Those are both really amazing ingredients that you might end up seeking them out just to make this recipe if you don't already have them, and then find yourself using them in a ton of stuff. We certainly do, particularly the bean paste with chili is so great in different sauces for like fried rices and just kind of anything you can think to use it on. It's spicy and salty and umami and wonderful. Half a pound of ground pork and sesame oil. That is it. Let's get into it. Without any further ado, I'm going to cook the noodles in boiling water until al dente. So I'm going to go ahead and put my pot of water on right now. And salt it, I think. It doesn't say to, but I am going to. All right, while I wait for my water to boil, going to do the rest of the mise en place. It is not a lot. Doing it slightly out of order here, but just because the scallions were the first thing that I laid my hands to, but I don't think it super matters. Also, gotta shout out in this recipe, she's not hiding the stuff that you have to do in the ingredient list. It's actually like a lot of the mise en place stuff is in the recipe, and there's not that much of it. That's how easy it is. I can't say enough good things about this recipe. Anyway, what I am doing is I am chopping the white parts of the scallions. So basically the you know the white parts, but once I slice them thinly, I'm just going over them with a knife a few more times so that they end up in, you know, like little micro chunks. I'm breaking them down more than I'm going to break down the greens. The greens I'm going to slice, and those get tossed in at the end. I'm so excited that I get to eat this. Truly, truly love this recipe. And by the way, this is for 2 servings, and she says 2 servings as a snack. It's a pretty good snack. We've eaten it for dinner many times. Now I'm slicing the green parts, and I'm doing it a little bit on an angle, which is usually what I like to do. A little bit of a diagonal. And then I am going to peel my 1/2 inch piece of ginger and mince that up. Gonna do my thing that I like to do, which is peeling the ginger with a spoon. It's the best way I know how to do it. We have these ginger candies called Gin-Gins that are really good, but it has that disturbing Mr. Peanut thing where there's a like a ginger guy on it, he's like the mascot, and he's like a knob of ginger. It says on the back that his name is Mr. Knobs, and in the art on the front of the bag, it shows him eating the Gin-Gins. So it is, again, it's kind of a cannibalism thing. It's been observed about Mr. Peanut before. I think Mr. Knobs should also be maybe brought up for war crimes at The Hague. They're good, though. Okay, mincing the ginger. And it says you should come out with about 2 tablespoons of ginger. May have slightly less than that, so I might grab another little piece here and do more. And you can maybe hear that my water is starting to come to a boil. And this recipe is available, it's in the book, it's also available online in an article, you know, promoting the book. I think it's on like CBS This Morning or some website. But I definitely recommend checking out the book. It's a really, really good, interesting memoir. Okay, water is coming to a boil, and I'm going to cook the pasta until al dente. According to package directions, it says about 10 minutes. I'm going to go for like 8 minutes to start. Then, pasta bubbling away, I am going to mix the 2 bean pastes and the teaspoon of sugar. So that's 2 tablespoons of the black bean paste, 1 tablespoon of the red bean paste, the bean paste with chili, and a teaspoon of sugar. And I'm going to mix all those up. And I kind of ran out of stuff to do until the pasta's done. But I think I will go ahead and start getting my wok heating up. Put that on high until, as it says, a drop of water skitters over the surface, a description I really like. That was the timer for my pasta, so I'll see how that's doing. Needed a little more time. All right, to drain. And then I put it back in the pot and toss it with a little, just like drop of peanut oil to keep it from sticking, or in my case, just the grapeseed oil. Peanut oil is marginally more delicious, but that's okay. Making sure my wok is hot enough, and then I will add a tablespoon of the oil and throw in the ginger for just like a classic little aromatic interval of about 60 seconds till it gets nice and fragrant. And then immediately afterward, we'll throw in the pork and the white parts of the scallions. So speaking of which, I should unwrap my pork here before I do anything, because it's going to go fast once it goes. All right. Ooh, yeah. Stir frying that around. And the wok is hot. Cool. That is fragrant. I'm going to throw in my scallion whites and the pork. Ooh, yeah, the wok got super, super hot. My ginger almost kind of burned a little bit. Can you even hear me? So, not sure if you can hear me, but my wok was maybe even too hot. Not a problem that I usually have or think is even real. Maybe should have just had more oil or something, but the ginger almost immediately got pretty crispy and dark. It should be fine ultimately. It's a little darker than I wanted, but now I'm stir frying the pork and the scallions around until all traces of pink have disappeared, which is going to happen here pretty soon. And then I will add in the bean pastes, and usually what happens is it turns into this kind of, this is going to sound gross, but it actually is ultimately really good. It's kind of a tarry little flavor paste, basically. It's really good. All right, all the traces of pink are gone in the pork, so I'm adding the bean pastes and the sugar, and I'm going to stir that around for about 2 minutes. And it is going to smell fantastic. It already does. And then I am going to toss in the scallion greens and the noodles and toss them, and then tip in a little sesame oil and just like a drop, stir it around, and then, as it says, tip it into 2 bowls, which I love that. So it's been about 2 minutes. Here go the scallion greens. Here go the spaghetti. Turning off the heat. Stirring around. And spaghetti almost always takes on a kind of reddish, brownish color that I love. Just in the kind of fattiness and oiliness from the wok and the pork and everything. Add that drop of sesame oil, and I turned the heat off. I can't remember if I said that already. I did a little more than a drop of sesame oil because I'm missing the richness from the peanut oil, or I anticipate missing it anyway. Nice little sesame smell coming off. And that is it. Please make this. Please. I beg of you. It has been such a nice quality addition to our life. I think it'll be the same for you. And I think you will enjoy this conversation with Mike Hoffman. I found it to be intensely, viscerally enjoyable. Some of his descriptions of his travels and the food and everything was just, I don't know. It's why I do this. I really enjoyed talking to Mike. Really happy he could take the time. Please enjoy, and I'll talk to you afterward.
very, very happy to be having this conversation because I think I share with you a real interest in food and cooking.
Yeah, no, that's a big reason why I wanted to have you on the show. I know it's something that you're super passionate about, cooking and food and travel and all of that stuff. So I am just excited that you could do it. I would love to know, first off, where does home cooking fit in or not fit in to your life at this moment?
Well, it's fit in a very massive way, given lockdown. I mean, my friend Sarah, who's been staying here, my girlfriend, she and I have been thinking about creating a lockdown cookbook because we were very, very excited about some of the meals that we managed to put together over the course of between March and June, or wherever they let us out.
What can you give us a preview? What were some things that
What do we do?
you were feeling like would make it
I
into the
think
book?
I've always had make it in the book. One of the things that would make it in the book is something that one of my editors and recipe they sent me for a Tunisian orange cake, which you make with ground almonds, oranges, lemons, an egg, and then you create a syrup with orange juice and lemon juice, and put it on top and sort of caramelize it. And that was kind of a go-to dessert for a week or two. Some really good. Sarah made some really wonderful ricciarelli biscuits, as they say here, cookies, as we say in America, which are a kind of almond biscuit that comes from Siena, very specifically from Tuscany. And I'd eaten when I used to live in Siena. I often ate them, and I had never taken it upon myself to figure out how to make them. And that was kind of a highlight. I mean, I have these sort of fallback. I learned to cook in Italy, really, and I mean, I just not like a cooking school, but when I was living in this little tiny town between Florence and Siena, I became close friends with a young Italian guy, and his mother indulged me sort of evening after evening, and I'd sit and watch what she did in the kitchen, and that's been kind of the basis of how and what I cook. And so there's one Tuscan standby that I recommend for the winter, and certainly we've eaten quite often, is Papa Pomodoro, which is like this one of the simplest. So much of Tuscan food grows out of poverty and using ingredients, leftovers, and inexpensive ingredients. So with a clove of garlic, a tomato, a few leaves of basil, some olive oil, and stale bread, you can make a really wonderful tomato infused, very thick soup that is something that I came to love living there. And so we made that a few times. Actually, I probably ate more meat than I usually do. And so, I mean,
Interesting.
we often had tagliata, just taking a sirloin steak and grilling it and putting it on a bed of arugula and with a little olive oil and Parmesan cheese, salt and pepper, and it's like incredibly simple and and a really wonderful second course. I've done a lot of, we ate a lot of vegetables too. When I think about it, a lot of, even though was the spring, felt like the kind of winter of our discontent, and so we made a lot of winter kind of salads, with kohlrabi and white radish and radicchio and fennel. So it was like very kind of crunchy and substantial sort of salad that we dressed with, some really good olive oil that I get from a friend of mine who lives up above the Amalfi Coast. He has 22 hectares of land on which he grows, makes a wine, this wonderful olive oil, oranges, lemons. But anyway, so I have like vat after vat of his olive oil. And that's actually something that I think that Americans actually could benefit from using more and more creatively olive oil. It's an extraordinary it's extraordinary in terms of what it does to the flavor of things. And it's, I think, really worth spending the money on a good olive oil. Because a lot of olive oil is, even some of what's called extra virgin olive oil isn't really. And I think it's time well spent doing a little research about where you're getting your oil and making sure it doesn't need to come from Italy. There's great olive oil in California. But I do think it's a brilliant, and I mean, I suppose that's one of the things we've done is paid a lot of attention to ingredients because we've been able to live more cheaply, or we've been there's, I mean, many of the things I often spend money on, like going to the theater or going to restaurants, weren't really options. And so we did actually have a tendency to kind of spoil ourselves in terms of the quality of the ingredients that we bought. But it really does make a difference to what food tastes like. I mean, that's what Italian cooking is really about, that. Chopping things up in really small pieces and using really good ingredients.
Yeah, Haley and I had a bit of a phase a few years ago of doing a grilled meat on a bed of arugula with like a little bit of olive oil and lemon, and that was it.
Yeah.
Like, I just got super into that, expanded into realizing like, oh, basically anything, if I pull it off of the grill and I put it onto a bed of arugula, probably with some lemon and maybe some Parmesan, it's gonna be really good. And it just takes like a big slab of meat to like, oh, this is maybe with a starch in there, this is a meal.
Absolutely.
And I know what you mean. I feel like I'm always on the verge of being somebody that super cares about olive oil. I feel like it really seems like so much of what we've done with olive oil in terms of like taking it on board in America is like cooking stuff in it, like using it as a cooking medium.
Yeah, something to fry in, as opposed to using it like ketchup, it's a much better way to use it. You know what I mean? Put it on things and pay attention to what it does to the taste of them.
Yeah, because also as I am coming to understand it, we took a Zoom cooking class from this chef, Eric Ajapong, who was on Top Chef. And it was really, really neat. And he was talking about, somebody was saying, oh, can I use olive oil for this? And he was saying, oh, no, you really want to use, we were making it's like a Caribbean dish called doubles, which our mutual friend and family member, Mark, is super into because he gets them in Brooklyn. But that's like fried dough. And somebody was saying, oh yeah, can I use, olive oil for this? Because that's what we have, or we like to fry in olive oil. And he was saying, I really tried to use canola oil for just about everything for that application because olive oil can go acrid really, really fast if you're cooking at a high temperature, which is interesting because I always thought of it as like, oh, it has a relatively high smoke point, so it's good for that kind of thing. But learning really that it's like, oh no, it can go acrid really, really fast if you're using it to cook a lot of different stuff in. I thought that was very interesting, but also I think a lot of that comes from the sort of almost the like demonization of canola oil. I find myself being like, oh, I don't know if I want to fry this in canola oil. That's supposed to be bad. Olive oil is supposed to be better. But I think it's just that we've just ended up with a misapprehension of the role of both of those oils, I think.
Well, the other thing is, olive oil, you want olive oil that tastes like something. So if you don't want your dough to taste like olive oil, then it's better not to fry it in olive oil, because any good olive oil is going to have a distinctive taste. If olive oil starts tasting like nothing, then it's probably not very good. And so, that the thing about canola oil is a more neutral kind of oil to cook in. So it has that, it's more like cooking in vegetable oil in terms of the quality, what it does, how it interacts with the food or whatever is being fried in it. But there are certain things certain things that you fry in olive oil and to your great advantage. A great little appetizer and super simple is just to fry, sage leaves in olive oil. Just saute them lightly in olive oil. And that's a fantastic thing. Also, like pimiento de padrón peppers, a Spanish thing. If you want to fry those should be fried in olive oil. You want to fry anchovy, that should be done in olive oil. There's certain things where the olive oil is in the same way that, certain wine goes with certain food, olive oil is the tool, for certain things. And Italians cook almost exclusively with it. In some parts of Italy, they cook with butter, but in Emilia-Romagna and in the north, and there's certain dishes where, butter is allowed, but generally speaking, it's funny. I was at a dinner party in Milan not very long ago, and just to put the cat among the chickens, I said at this table of people from there, all over, from different parts of Italy, I said, "So, what region really makes the best olive oil?" And oh my God,
and then Italy split off into its eight
exactly.
different
It was
component
World War
kingdoms.
III. I mean, there's some very, very strong feelings about olive oil.
And what was the conclusion?
Well, there were 7 different regions, as it turned out, that produced the best. Hard to imagine how all of them can be the best, but apparently they are. I still think, but I don't know, because they are different. They are different. I mean, Tuscan olive oil is different from olive oil from Puglia. I mean, Tuscan olive oil is more delicate. Pugliese olive oil has a stronger taste, but they're both great.
So when was it in your life? Can you like tell us a little bit more about like living in Tuscany? Because everything you just described sounds like an absolute, like, it honestly sounds, it sounds like on Seinfeld when Elaine was writing for the J. Peterman catalog. Like, that is how romantic it sounds. Like, what was that time in your life? What did you learn? What was that like?
It was extraordinary. I mean, really extraordinary in that so I was after I'd lived in England for a chunk of time, done my second degree over here, and then I'd visited Italy a couple of times, but I'd had this interesting encounter with a friend of a friend in Amsterdam, and he said to me, "Oh, if you ever want to go to Italy, or live in Tuscany, or I have a little apartment." And he said Siena. It wasn't actually in Siena. It was in a tiny little town called Staggia Senese. But so I had this in the back of my mind, and so I was playing tennis in Seattle with a friend of mine I was staying with, and we both wanted to be writers. And I said, "You know what? I mean, I can get hold of this apartment in Siena. I know we don't have any money, but there's somebody I know who might give us a little money to write this thing, and maybe we could just go stay there, and maybe the rent's really low, and let me check." So I call him up, and it was like virtually free. So we just decided to move to this town and try our luck as writers. And very short time after I arrived there, someone said, you need to buy wine from Il Dottore Leoncini, who was like the leading citizen of this town, because he was the pharmacist. And so we went to knocked on the door of the pharmacy, and we were led in to genuflect before Dottore Leoncini and buy some of his Chianti. And his son had just come back from military service, and he was going to training to be a pathologist at the University of Siena, and we hit it off and became friends. So it wasn't just living in Italy and having the kind of extraordinary good fortune of going out each day to the co-op and buying prosciutto each day, buying fresh prosciutto each day, and buying fresh vegetables from the vegetable guy. And there was the macellaio, the butcher, was across the square from us, and there was always a entire veal carcass hanging in the doorway with a pomegranate underneath it, and you had to sort of push the veal out of the way to get to the counter. But anyway, what I learned
was there a
was
pomegranate underneath it.
I don't know. I guess that it's the acceptable face of butchery. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't.
Sorry, you were saying?
No. I was just so anyway. I learned a lot of things. One of them was I watched all these these ladies from the town go out and do the shopping every day. So we started just getting up in the morning and doing shopping only for that day. And my friend Jim also was working at a very good restaurant in Seattle. I don't know if it's still there. It's called Cafe Juanita. And so he knew a little bit about cooking and had done some cooking. And then, getting introduced to Signora Leoncini, because we started eating with Lorenzo's family every night, and just trying to figure out how she constructed these flavors and how she created this kind of depth in terms of the sauces the pasta sauces she'd make, and these kind of really rich tomato sauces that were, usually served on wild boar maybe, or some, I don't know what, I'm trying to remember what the other, there was one she made with beef too, but then I became just fascinated by just little things, like watching the dottore every night cut up a fresh peach and then in a glass of Chianti, and that was like dessert, and that was something that I still love, and the matching of different fruit and cheeses, and also watching, because we stayed there for 3 months, and then I came back and I did an acting job. Then we went back through the winter, so we could really watch the seasons change, and how even the cuisine in a household, varies wildly dependent on what nature is kind of producing in that moment. So that was really interesting too, to see that, to be in a culture that really kind of acknowledged, you never ate anything that was out of season. You never bought a vegetable that was, you didn't, if it was the winter, you didn't try to buy bad fresh tomatoes. You used canned tomatoes until they were real proper fresh tomatoes again, so it was all about acknowledge, and the thrill of the fall and the porcini mushroom season. And you could ask a Tuscan, or I think this is true of most Italians who live in the country, you could ask them virtually anything, but never ever ask them where they find their porcini mushrooms. It's an absolute secret, where that people go out and they have certain places and certain chestnut trees they know to look underneath to find them, but they might give you some of what they found, but you're absolutely forbidden to ask where they found them.
Huh.
Yeah. It's a real family secret. Yeah, they're a precious thing, they're really, they're an amazing. And, and when you get, I remember the first time I saw them and I thought, well, what do you do with them? And they said, what do you mean? You just put them on the grill and eat the whole porcini mushroom, freshly grilled with a little oil in it. Fantastic thing. And so I forgot. I'm just talking and talking.
No, I know and it's great.
Yeah.
But you were saying, I think, just that, seasonally there is, that's really, you sort of watch how the family seasonally, moves through these different things, and that really changes the menu, as opposed to, oh, these are just the things that we have no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. And so that, and it's also true region to region, and the different regions of Italy take extraordinary pride in what they make, and they really can be very contemptuous of what the cooking in another region. The Tuscans are very contemptuous of Roman kitchen, as they say, because they think the Romans cook with too much salt, and they cook with too much fat, and they cook with too much oil. And, the Tuscans are, the kind of aristocrats of Tuscany in a way, even linguistically. It's the only region that doesn't speak a dialect. And it's the language, they always, when they talk about how they speak Italian, they always say it's la lingua di Dante. It's the language that Dante spoke and wrote in. So why do we need a dialect? So, but there's other, those other cultures are like, one of the things I got to know making this, my ill-fated Gore Vidal movie, which we shot in the Amalfi Coast, was a fantastic ingredient, which you can get on Amazon, called colatura. And what it is it comes from a little town just north of, or just east of Salerno. It's between Salerno and Naples, called Chitarra. And it's the extracted liquid from pressed anchovies, but it's absolutely a staggering thing. You take a little bit of that. You chop up a little garlic and parsley and red pepper, put it to the side. There's no cooking involved. You cook the pasta, then you take some of the pasta water and mix it with a little bit of this colatura, and then mix it all in with the garlic and the parsley and with a good pasta. I mean, that's something in America I don't think we pay enough attention to, is some pasta is vastly superior to other pasta. I'm not talking about pasta dishes. I'm talking about the stuff itself. But when you have a dish like that, the flavor of the pasta is very, very exposed. And so it needs to be something really good. And what you want in a pasta is when you put it in the hot water, you want to be able to smell the wheat. And I had this experience not this summer, but the summer before I was in Puglia for Ferragosto, and I went with my friend Mark Antonio Borghese to visit another filmmaker friend down in the very heel of the boot, what's called Salento. And anyway, we went to this restaurant in this town called Tricase, and we had a pasta, and I was like, this pasta is magical. The pasta itself, I've never eaten pasta this good in my life. And they go, oh, it's Benedetto Cavaliere makes the pasta. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I just thought that was like a brand. And so then my friend Eduardo, he picks up the phone, makes a call, and we get in the car and we go and meet this 85-year-old guy named Benedetto Cavaliere, who makes this extraordinarily high-end pasta that they made, his family's made for like 120 years. And what makes it special is, instead of drying the pasta at 140 degrees, they dry the pasta at about 100 degrees. And so it's this slow drying of the pasta means that it retains the flavor of the wheat. And so that when you eat it, it's like eating incredibly good bread, as opposed to, some bland white stuff. So that's been a real, revelation. Like, you spend another $1 a package and you can end up finding, some really wonderful, wonderful pastas, and of course, some maybe some people say, Barilla is Barilla, and that's fine with me. But I think like this stuff that Benedetto Cavaliere makes is really, really extraordinary. And you can find it, with the wonders of the internet. You can find Roma pasta. You can find that. You can find a really wonderful pasta called faina. Anyway, I'd recommend doing a little research on that too, because if you like Italian food, it's really like I've now even boring myself to say it's about the ingredients, but it is. That's everything's very simple. And, you go often to an Italian restaurant in America and you'll find a pasta sauce that has like 12 different ingredients in it, and chicken and olives and artichokes. And, you can never find that in Italy. It's either, if it's amatriciana, it's guanciale or pancetta, same thing, or not same thing, different thing, but, bacon, and olive oil and onion and pecorino cheese. Basta, Carbonara is egg yolk, Parmesan, or pecorino if you're in Rome, butter and pancetta. That's it. A tomato sauce is your sofrito, tomato, oil, and tomato. That's it. That's that purity and that exactness with which, they've been combining these flavors forever, and what they've come to know about that leads to some really wonderful dining experiences, which I think we sometimes destroy through overcomplication.
Yeah, there really is something when you only have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 ingredients, you really do want them to it's all well and good, I guess, basically to say like, oh yeah, you got to use the best ingredients, but it's like, well, of course you always would want to use the best, but you really see the value in it when there's only 2 or 3 or 4 things going into a dish, where it's just like, yeah, there's kind of nowhere else to hide.
Yeah, there's nowhere to hide. Yeah, and that's really going to shine through. And that's great. And I mean, I think almost when I think about it, I'm trying to think of an Italian dish that really relies on more than 3 or 4 ingredients. I'm sure they exist, but I'm just thinking of, saltimbocca. Yeah, I mean it's just veal, and a sage leaf and prosciutto cooked in butter. That's it. That's it. I'm trying to think of pastas even that are really complicated, but I mean, I suppose you can get into, but even, I mean, Italians even tend to be very simple they don't mix a lot of herbs together in the same pot, as it were. I mean, if oregano is going to be the dominant herb, or basil is going to be the dominant herb, that's another one of those Anglicisms. Or if rosemary is, then that's the flavor that's there, but they tend not to like throw them all at something.
Which also makes sense, because if you think about any of those herbs, they're so powerful. Like, they have so much going on. I mean, oregano and basil, I feel like especially, it's just like
and sage as well.
Real
sage is
fully. Yeah,
sorry,
exactly. That's like there's just a lot. There's
plenty. It's plenty to enjoy, And I think I've been guilty of often like cooking with not letting one of those flavors sort of speak for itself. I think the more I cook, the simpler my cooking gets, I think, which is interesting. And But again, I'm trying to think of other things that have been. I mean, but there are other cuisines, that I've recently kind of gotten connected to that I think are really, really worth exploring. And and part of the reason we don't. So I've been traveling quite often to the Republic of Georgia in the Caucasus, which is an extraordinary place. It has it's very much its own culture. I mean, it has a language sort of like, like Basque and Finnish and Hungarian that's not related to the Indo-European languages at all. It's been this sort of small. It's bordered by Russia in the north, Turkey in the west, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Iran. I think it has a border with Iran. It might not. But anyway. It's been, it's one of the oldest Christian countries in the world. I think it was Christian since 4th century AD or something crazy like that. But it's very much developed its own musical style, its own style of dance, and very much its own cuisine, which is absolutely exquisite. I mean, Georgia was the place that supplied all the wine to the Soviet Union. During that period, it was where it's the country Stalin's from, but it always was able to retain more of its national identity than many of the other Soviet republics, and now it's very much its own place. But I tell you what, the food is absolutely extraordinary.
When you think of Georgian food, what do you think of? What are the predominant flavors? What's the approach?
Turmeric is very, 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 very dominant in it, and what they make. Let me think of some things because I have to remember the language. Georgian is an extraordinarily difficult language. I think I've been there like 6 times and I managed to learn about 3 words. But they make. They have a national pizza kind of dish, which is kind of bread stuffed with cheese. And I should have done 5 minutes of thinking, because I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but a lot of really, really interesting things with vegetables and walnuts and turmeric. Kind of they're not like, I guess they're kind of almost like pestos in a way, but you eat them as main courses. I mean, as starters, and then they have a wonderful good way that they do shish kebab, or a kind of shish kebab of shashlik, where they grill it all, but then they put a big bowl of mixed herbs just pulled out of the ground, like very rough, in the middle of the table, and you just reach into the bowl and eat the herbs with the meat, and it's very, very, very good. I'm trying to remember what this. Then they make there's a lot of stews, chicken based, but with this, but they're cooked for a long time, so they have a really, really intense flavor. I guess that's part of it. It's not necessarily hugely spicy, although they make a kind of garlic ketchup sauce that's or garlic tomato sauce that's kind of, that really, if you want to push it, you certainly can. But I don't think I've ever run into a cuisine except, I guess, for Italy, because that's, for me, like the starting point of everything, that I've enjoyed as much as Georgian food. It's really, and very varied. I mean, really varied. Lots and lots of vegetable dishes that are very exotic. And there's a couple of good Georgian restaurants in London. I imagine there must be one in LA.
I would imagine so as well. The bread and cheese stuffed thing that you were describing sounds a little bit like, or it reminds me of khachapuri.
Khachapuri is Georgian. Khachapuri is Georgian. Khachapuri is Georgian.
Which is kind of having a moment right now. I feel like
that's what I was trying. But that's what I was trying to think of. Khachapuri is a Georgian word and a Georgian food.
Well, so there you go. You were ahead of the curve on that. Yeah, I feel like I have seen. Maybe it's just I would see it advertised a lot in LA at various, like, especially like Armenian restaurants and stuff, and you would see it, and then I feel like in the past year or so, maybe because of quarantine and all of us, myself included, just going like, put carbs and cheese in my face now. It's like a lot of recipes for it.
It's good. And you know what I was saying turmeric, and I meant to be saying tarragon the whole time. So I want to change that, because tarragon is they even make a kind of, like, I can't remember what it's called. Again, a tarragon kind of ketchup, kind of sauce that's fantastic. But then they make a khachapuri with eggs, which is, and chinkali are Georgian. They're like Georgian dumplings, and they're fantastic. And they could be in soup, or they could not. But they don't need to be. Then there's a kind of, what's it called? Something like ayap sandali, which is a kind of tomato sauce, or what else would you call it? Like a ratatouille kind of thing. That's like. Then they do a lot with beans. Beans are called lobio. The shish kebab's called, the name for shish kebab is sfati. That's what you call it. And karcho is a kind of really cool soup that they do. And all these. I'm trying to remember how they make these. They're like purees. That's what I'm trying to get at. So back to you saying, there's always minced garlic in it. There's always lemon juice in it. Actually, they use cilantro as well, quite often. Anyway, I would recommend it. Anywhere you can find it, I would recommend it.
Oh wow, yeah, that it's so interesting hearing about. I mean, you kind of think like, or at least I know that in America, it does feel like our sense of Eastern European food, probably stemming from the Cold War, is just very sort of one-dimensional and like we almost don't even have an image of it because we have such a sort of like monolithic image of that region. Again, I think probably stemming from the Cold War, but from what little I know about it and everything you're describing, it's like that, especially like that part of Eastern Europe, just the amount of different cultures and things that are colliding. Those are really my favorite cuisines to learn about, is places that are at the intersection of a bunch of other different cultures and cuisines, and that there's,
You're right. I mean, that's really true. And Georgia was that, I think it was, I don't know whether it was certainly like a country Alexander the Great traveled through, and I think it might have even been on the Silk Road. So there was always a lot of trade. And so in any country like that, I mean, the same, I'll tell you another country that has, which God bless them, Lebanon, going through a terrible time at the moment, but
yeah,
Lebanese food is, we have a very, I think, limited notion of what it is. And we think of, hummus and tabbouleh and, I don't know, maybe a lamb kebab. But when you get there and see, there's an incredible restaurant there called Taleh, I think it's called. And this guy had this incredible idea because he was thinking, you can go to LA, of course, many, many Lebanese restaurants, or London or Paris or wherever, and there's something traveling as a Lebanese restaurant. But he was saying, actually, what? Lebanese food is something so different than that. And so what he did was he decided to go to the different regions and sub-regions of Lebanon and bring like two kind of older women who were kind of keepers of the culinary tradition in their town or region, bring them to this restaurant. And for 1 week, they were like the chefs in this restaurant. And he would get them any ingredients they wanted. And these two ladies or three ladies would make the food for that week. And that's what you came in and experienced, was this other view, like hyper-regional view, like microclimate view of Lebanese cooking. And some of the things, I'd never seen or eaten anything like it. It was just something that was that neighborhood, that town, that, 12 streets had developed as their own little hyper-local culinary tradition.
That's so neat. Yeah, that stuff like that is fascinating. I have very relatively little experience with Lebanese food, certainly not at the level of authenticity that you're describing, but it does make me think of, or kind of bum me out, the amount of stuff like that I feel like even just here in America that we were at risk of losing because of the pandemic, where we're seeing like, okay, so a lot of restaurants that are surviving are the big chains because, well, they can close a few locations and whatever, but
yeah.
the sort of more local, like mom and pop places that have been around a long time or even have just opened recently, those are the places that have no real backstop, and also have just, it's harder for them to kind of adjust to a world where it's like, oh, okay, we're doing curbside pickup, or we're doing this now, or we're doing that now. They just don't have the ability to be in people's faces. And also I think genuinely I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes you do end up feeling like, well, if things are uncertain, I guess I kind of trust a giant corporation that's worried about being sued over someplace where I don't know the people who, whatever, like I have a kind of like inborn I think a lot of us do, like, tendency to just sort of go like, well, things are uncertain right now, so if I don't know where I'm going to eat, I guess I just got to go with this, I don't know. All that to say, it does, it's, I imagine that's probably true all over the world, even in England.
I guess
like
it probably it must explain. Well, the truth is, I don't know if it is true all over the world, because if you go to Italy, people are going to the local trattoria. They're not going to a chain restaurant. I mean, Italy's not overrun by chain restaurants at all, and neither is France. Right. I mean, I think the problem with it may be a problem of I think that in America particularly, there's I think we're always looking for the things, because we don't have our own kind of unified culture. We're sort of a nation of, not sort of, we are a nation of immigrants, that somehow things, common experiences become more important to us than they are for, the common experience of being Italian is just, being Italian, and you know what that means, and you know what that means in terms of food. For us, I think, our common, the experience that unites us is McDonald's can unite us, right? We can recognize that as something that we all know what that is, and we all know how to participate in that. And I do think that whereas, a family-run Chinese restaurant or a family-run Korean restaurant or a family-run Lebanese restaurant maybe feels like something that isn't for us, I don't know, but I do think there's something in that.
Yeah, and I think it just gets tough to where I imagine a decent amount of it as well has to do with just literally different countries' approaches to stimulus and what they feel is worth preserving. Where here it's sort of like, well, we've kind of it's sort of been, every place for yourself, you figure it out, it's up to you, and it's up to your customers to say, hey, there's this local mom and pop place that's just reopening now, we really got to support them so they stay open. But that really unfortunately only goes so far, because people are pretty stretched thin. Haley and I were sad to see that our favorite just local Chinese food place, Sunhai Inn on Los Feliz, had closed during the pandemic. And again, in a period where we were going from, we really don't know about ordering out, what do we do, whatever, to the point where we got comfortable and saying, places are figuring it out, this seems totally fine and safe to do. What places should we support? It's already too late. This place that's been around for so many years is
that's really
gone.
That's really too bad. Gosh, I hate that.
Yeah, and it's the sort of thing that, like, things will survive and change, and I don't hopefully that these cuisines won't completely, these little sort of microclimates as you described them of American regional cuisine won't completely go away. But it is, it's like languages, like you were talking about, these little things that cooking is so much like a language, these things that if they don't get passed on, they go away.
And globalization isn't friendly to that. It just isn't. It
Absolutely.
doesn't care. And I mean, I think it's really, gosh, I was thinking about like places Americans wouldn't eat, maybe, or I mean, many Americans would, because many Americans are very adventurous about what they consume. But I was just, when I was with Atticus, my son, when he was living in Egypt, he took me to a Yemeni restaurant. Was really like a pretty rough looking place when you walked in. And there was a huge sink in the middle because, in Muslim culture, it's like imperative that you wash up to the elbows or before you eat. So everybody who came in, only men, first of all, everybody who came in would go to the sink and wash their hands and arms and face really well before they sat down to eat. And then you sat down, and they didn't bring you a plate. They just brought you a massive round piece of bread, which was basically your plate. And then you would just have these bowls of stew, beef stew, goat stew, vegetable stew, and you would dip the pieces you rip your massive piece of bread into pieces and dip it in the various stews. And oh my God, I'm salivating thinking about it. I swear to God, DC, it's probably, I would rank it among the top 5 meals I've ever eaten in my life.
Wow.
It was absolutely brilliant, and just shows you what, someone can do with, obviously, whoever's owned that restaurant or was running that restaurant. I mean, it was dirt cheap, and they didn't have a lot of money to play with. But, being inventive with simple ingredients and understanding the chemistry of the kitchen, how things react with each other, it's amazing what can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it is so inspiring, and it's one of I guess it's one of those things that we look forward to getting to experience again after the world is in some sort of shape again, where it makes sense to sort of for people to travel freely and have those experiences, because that is such a big part of, it's not just the food sort of completely out of context, oh my gosh, just this flavor on my tongue is so great. It really is everything to do with it. It's the experience. And that is, exactly what you were describing. It's all of those. It's all of those things. Do you have a place that's on your hit list of, okay, when, like I said, it makes sense to, travel around again and things are more open? Is there a place that you've never been that you were like, I would love to go there, I would love to eat that, I want to know what that is?
I'm sure there is. I have to say I haven't been staying home. I've just come back from 2 months in Italy. And actually it was quite a remarkable experience on a culinary level, because Sarah and I were basically, everywhere from the tip of the boot in the south to the Alps in the north, and we spent 2 weeks in Sardinia as well, which is absolutely its own culinary experience, very different from the mainland of Italy. And we were in, the Piedmont, and we were in Barolo and Asti, where all those wonderful wines come from, where the food's a bit heavier and there's more polenta. And this time of year really becomes a lot about the various kinds of mushrooms. I went to a market right before I left at the end of September, and I think there was something like 14 kinds of mushrooms for sale in the little market in the square.
Oh
and those people, they know exactly what mushroom does what. I mean, on a culinary level. So that was quite extraordinary. But where I would go, trying to think of the other places I've gone lately. So I'm going to be back in Poland in November, and I've actually come to Poland is great kind of cuisine in the winter. So that I would enjoy. I don't know. I'd really like to go to Iran, even though I don't know. I mean, I've eaten a certain amount of Iranian food, but it's always different when you get to the place, right? Although not to say that the Iranian food in London isn't good. It is, but I just have a feeling that to actually go to Shiraz or go to Isfahan and
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, that feels true generally of foods that are being cooked in another country, where you sort of think, there's a really good.
Absolutely,
I don't know if you've
Indian
seen the
food
documentary.
Indian food is different in India. It is. I mean, everything, it's cooked differently. It tastes different. Mexican food is different in Mexico, right? I mean, Mexican food is nothing like what we think of as Mexican food. And once you get beyond the border, it's a completely different thing.
Right. I think it's exactly it's almost like a pointillist like painting, where it's sort of, okay, from across the room, this cuisine looks like, or this, the painting looks like one coherent, okay, that's what that cuisine is. And then when you actually get up close, when you get to the place, you can see as you said earlier, the different microclimates that actually make up what it is. It's not one monolith. It's all of these different things in these different regions. That's so cool. I love that. And I just couldn't be more jealous of your I guess European-ness at this moment, or the ability to at least travel around within Europe is pretty cool.
It's an extraordinary thing to I feel incredibly lucky. I'm incredibly grateful to be living here and to have the access to experience so many different cultures. It's like it's kind of it is a remarkable opportunity, and even places that I might not think immediately, I love German food, although I actually really do like German food. But I'm just thinking of I'd made this movie about the last year of Tolstoy's life called The Last Station, and Helen Mirren was in, and they wanted Helen to come and do some kind of it was a press junket of some sort in Berlin. And she said, I will do it, grant on the count. I mean, if they will guarantee me a Christmas goose with all the trimmings. And so we had this incredible meal, which was a goose, which I don't think I've hardly ever eaten in my life, a goose, with two kinds of cabbage, red cabbage and white cabbage. This is another one when I can feel myself salivate, because this was one, and then, the potatoes cooked in the goose fat, and oh my God, I cannot tell you how good this meal was and how grateful. I could care less whether she did any press. I was just so happy that was the condition of her employment, because it was like, it was such a brilliant thing to ask for, and I wouldn't have known to ask for it. But next time, if anybody ever needs me to go to Germany, that's going to be my first and only condition. I don't care, especially if it's in July. I would really recommend this. Yeah,
that kind of leads me to my next question. So you've made, in addition to having made a ton of movies, you've made a ton of movies in a bunch of different places. And I really love, in addition to loving movies and trying to make movies and all that stuff, I collect like behind the scenes, like memoirs or tell-alls or books or whatever. And one thing that I particularly love is when you read about, Orson Welles running around Europe trying to like slap together a movie that's probably like shadily financed by like,
sure,
the mafia or something. Where you read about
that would be the good news.
Gilliam kind of.
That's the
yes, exactly. Well, because it has the word financed in it. And Terry Gilliam making like Baron Munchausen, and he's at Cinecittà, and just literally reading about honestly lunch, like how lunch is different on these different sets or in these different cultures, or how specifically how food and regional food fits into the work day. Because when I think about it in America, I think about, base case, you pretty much have a steamer tray full of chicken with lemon slices on top of it, because you're not really worried about eating. You're just worried about, people need sustenance so we can get back to work. What are the different lunch experiences you've had, or just the different culinary experiences you've had shooting things in different countries? How does that vary? What do you like? What do you not like? Does it actually affect the quality of the work, or do you know what I mean by that?
I do. I'm afraid, no, it isn't a broad question. It's just that my answer is not going to be a very interesting one, because for many movies now, I've advocated working a straight 10-hour day with a walking lunch, so as not to have the lunch break in which every actor's makeup goes to shit and you have to spend another hour and a half after lunch putting people back together. I tend to make I've made a lot of period movies with a lot of big hair and a lot of big makeup. So I learned I was throwing, and plus there's something about lunch, which, the Italians have it right in the Spanish, like we have lunch and then we sleep. But the problem is with a movie crew, you need like get up from lunch and hopefully hit the ground running, but it never really works. It always takes a while to rev back up. And so I've, instead of working 12-hour days with a half hour for lunch or whatever, I've just choose to work a 10-hour day with a running lunch where people can break off and eat whenever they break off and eat, and there's food around all the time, and good food around all the time. And to tell you the truth, when I'm actually in the middle of shooting, I probably am not. It's probably about the only time in my life that I'm not obsessing about what I'm going to eat. That's maybe a disappointing answer, but I think that the film catering, on the other hand, the film catering on the Gore movie was like sensational. But also it was always like the best thing about the 10-hour day is 8 to 6, and then you have the evening. And so if you play your cards right, you can be in a very good restaurant on the Amalfi Coast by 8:30 eating some of the best mozzarella cheese you'll find truly anywhere in the world. I think mozzarella cheese from Campania is the most extraordinary, truly an extraordinary thing. And then some of the pastas they make with fish as well. I'm not really very good at. I don't really understand cooking with fish very well. I mean, I make salmon and I make a really good pasta with fresh tuna. And now that I've gotten kind of hooked into this anchovy culture, I know a guy who owns a restaurant in Chitara who's written a book called The Anchovy Whisperer, which is
wow.
But he makes, all right, this is something I'd recommend. So
Please.
we say, but you would see on a menu in America, maybe pesto genovese, right? Which means just what we think of as pesto, which comes from the area around Genoa, comes from Liguria, right? But then the Neapolitans make something called pasta genovese, which is something completely different, which is something you make you chop up a lot of onions and then you cook the beef with the onions and probably some balsamic vinegar for like 5 or 6 hours till it's really, really liquefied. And that becomes your sauce. Okay, so this guy does it, but he does it with tuna. So he takes the onions and cooks them with the tuna for this long period of time, and because Genovese al tonno. But I swear to God, that's another thing. I keep coming up with the best thing I've ever eaten, but that stuff is absolutely brilliant.
He's almost cooking it until this is like a long cook.
It's like melted tuna. It's melted tuna and onions. And it is so
Is there a
good.
better,
There's a little tiny bit of
word than melted? Oh my gosh.
I don't know, but no, but it was really like, yeah, it means new meaning to the term tuna melt.
Yeah, Haley and I have we've really been I think have mostly through her just via her making her puttanesca, that was kind of a gateway into the appreciation for like the little fishes, the little oily fishes that oftentimes come in cans and in tins and whatever. They're the best. I feel like that's one ingredient that I think we generally totally underrate, and that I think I also kind of grew up with a bias against, just because kids wouldn't really like it, small oily fish, and then also just it became a byword for like gross, like, oh no, the pizza's ruined, you got anchovies on it.
Right,
you know
right.
I'm like, where, bring them on, more anchovies, please.
Well, but I mean the way, again, that's interesting, the way that Italians will cook with anchovy, and puttanesca is a good example. It's really, again, to create this kind of rich kind of base note in the sauce. I mean, you would never want a puttanesca sauce to taste like anchovy. That would be seen as a mistake. But you want the kind of richness that thing gives to the sauce. That's
I can.
It's kind of like the equivalent of sofrito. It's not, don't want to taste carrot, you don't want to taste celery, you don't want to taste that onion, but it's those things and the way they react with the tomato, and then on top of that, the way all that reacts with like a bottle of Chianti, which is not something that generally I would want to sit around and sip, because I don't think it's really made for that. Those wines transform in chemical reaction to the ingredients in a tomato sauce. So, that's the stuff that fascinates me the most, is like the way in which the intuitive understanding of chemistry, because it is chemistry. It is truly like a very happy marriage of art and science when it works.
Yeah, it's I guess basically is just that, like, if it grows together, it goes together kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And they would really, and the Italians would really, really advocate that point of view, I think, and also there's the other thing that was interesting. I was up in the Longa, it's called, in this is in Piedmont, in the Barolo country, which sometime I'd really like to learn a lot more about, is the whole slow food movement, which started there in a town called Bra, which is where the university, they have this slow food university there, where I think I'm going to go back and visit in a couple of weeks if they don't lock us down, which I think they're on the verge of doing, which is sad, but maybe inevitable, and maybe for the best right now. Anyway, that's another thing to, I'm seeing it more and more, and the Italians have always done it, but now they're really learning how to market, 0 miles and slow food, and, so in a moment where, globalization is suggesting that we all eat the same things and the same brands and whatever, there's a very, very strong movement in the opposite direction in Italy in terms of really, really stressing local cuisines and local ingredients, and that's quite exciting.
Yeah, there's something so wonderful about that, whether it be, wine or olives, or like you were describing earlier, the porcinis that grow at the foot of the chestnut tree, and where it all just feels like people saying like, hey, do you know how good this hillside tastes? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you know how good this just like piece of earth that gets hit with like a, sun at a certain angle and a certain amount of rain and a certain amount of everything. Again, it's that microclimate word. It's just going like, and you can, hillside tastes good and like nothing else.
Absolutely. And I was, when I was with my friend who is the guy who makes the olive oil and very, very good white wine, very good Falangina. He was telling me that in his 22 hectares, he said there's 7 microclimates within the 22 hectares. Is like, I don't know. It's about, I don't know. It's probably about 60 acres, maybe. I don't know. I'm probably wrong, but I know a hectare is considerably more than an acre. But I don't know, 1.7, 2.7. I can't remember. Anyway, and so depending on that microclimate, he will grow one grape on one side of the hill and at one elevation, and another grape, what's maybe, I don't know, a third an acre, 2 acres away. And, and there'll be certain parts of the land where he's like, no, I can't really grow good wine here, so I'll put the Lemonia here and grow the lemon trees. It's a fascinating thing. I remember once traveling in what's it called, the Tri-Cities, in southern Washington, where they make the Columbia Gorge, Columbia River, all those good wines around Walla Walla, Washington, and Richmond and Pasco and that area. Anyway, they do make really, really good wine. But so we're driving along, and there was like vineyard. And then there was this beautiful piece of land. But there was a house there, and I was like, why isn't that a vineyard? And the person who really knew the region said, oh, because the land is too good. And it really struck me, because I didn't realize this whole thing about the relationship between stress and wine, and that if a grape isn't stressed, a grape doesn't have to struggle to survive and sustain itself, you can't make good wine from it. It just gets too fat and too sweet. And I thought that was really fascinating. I don't know why I threw that in, because that had nothing to do with anything. Oh, well, it does do with microclimates, though. It has to do with, so it's not like you're going to grow the lemon trees in the area because the land isn't good. It's good you're going to grow it there because the land is too good. It's too mineral rich, and the wine will be too sweet. The grapes will be too sweet if the grapes grow there. and they'll make,
And there's something so neat about that, and very sort of, Charlie Brown's.
it's
Christmas
feeling
tree
very
about
metaphorical, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know. We all
I think
struggle.
2020 is a stressed ass grape of a year. So
Absolutely, we hope for a good vintage. Yeah, it's that's exactly it's like Goethe says in Faust. Is the struggle is all.
Well, final question, Mike Hoffman.
Yes, sir.
Because it's getting on to be about dinner time where you're at. If
Yeah.
there was something, be it something that you ate all the time growing up, or that you have fond memories of, or just the best thing that you ever had, maybe in that restaurant in Egypt. If there was one thing that you don't already know how to make that you could snap your fingers and know how to cook perfectly, what would it be?
That's a really good. That's a great question, and I want to. Now the problem is I'm going to melt down because I'm going to be looking for the absolute perfect thing. But what would I really like to make that I don't know how to make? I suppose I think I could probably do it, but I have had some potatoes dauphinoise, some potatoes au gratin in my life that were life-changing, and I don't really know how they did it. So I would think maybe that, it's as simple as it is, and I'm sure I could figure it out. And I also really love to make great soup. I've never really made soup.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, soup is something, especially as we move into, as this bleak winter that now is approaching. I think the idea of something as comforting as a very, very good squash soup be something I should go to work on figuring out.
I think that's a great goal. I think that's something.
Yeah,
that
it is. It's noble.
Barolo in 2 weeks. I think you lock yourself in there with some squash and you
figure it out, DC. You figure it out.
Mike Hoffman, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, that was fun. Really fun.
Absolute blast. All right, that is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to my guest, Mike Hoffman. Thank you to you for listening. Thank you to Advance Bass, the amazing Owen Ashworth for my interstitial music. Thank you to Jason Anderson for July 4th, 2004, my intro song. Thank you to Sarah Beacon for my podcast art. That is Becan. You can find my novels that I have written, The Boy You Couldn't Sleep and Never Had To, and Crap Kingdom, available wherever books are sold. They are also available on audiobook. Support your local independent bookstore and other independent businesses this holiday season. I hope wherever you are safe and sane, and everything is not too... Yeah, I don't even want to say anything because I don't even want to jinx it, and who knows, but I wish you the best, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.